welcome to all to this panel discussion on defining what AI means for you in your business. I think this topic invites us for a lively discussion. So for those of you online, please join in as we discuss this theme and ask your questions. And we will try to dive in on those to drive the discussion forward. So I think a good way to start this discussion is by framing what we mean when we talk about AI. I took the liberty to look up the definition of AI by the AU high-level expert group. So let me start with this. So AI refers to systems, according to them, that display intelligent behavior by analyzing their environment and taking actions with some degree of autonomy to achieve specific goals. And what I'd like to do as a way of introduction of this panel is to ask the panelists not only to give a short introduction of themselves and their backgrounds, but also to share their definition or their view on what AI is with the audience. And maybe Camilla, we can start with you. Would you like to pick this up?
Sure. My name is Camilla Olsen, and I'm the co-founder and CEO of Savitude. And we bring speed and to and analytics to fashion design. For me, AI is a set of algorithms that with training, it's capable of learning.
Thank you. Sanjay, would you like to go next?
Yeah, Sanjay Mara. I have about 25 years of experience in the apparel footwear space. And that's been across technology, across analytics, process, strategy, supply chain, and general management. My current role is the SVP and GM for Stylumia for North America. And we apply machine learning based solutions to all aspects of decision-making across the value chain for the apparel business.
Thank you. Max, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, no, thank you very much for having me here as, I guess, another industry expert. So my name is Max Metral. I work as Senior Analytics Manager for Formula One, so a bit outside of the apparel industry. And for me, so I work around every business analytics subject, so not related to the car data, in case you ask. And so for me, AI is very interesting. Obviously, I'm not sure I can do a better job than the first definition you gave, Stefan. But for me, it's just how you can use computers and machine learning, very much like Camilla explained, but to mimic human functions. So that's why you can use speech recognition, image recognition, language translations, all these things. I think for me, the main benefit of AI is to speed things up and to have computers do things that humans could do, but it's just too painful, too difficult, too long to do, and maybe more efficiently. And that would be my definition.
Okay, thank you, Max. And then finally, we have Christiane. Could you also give an introduction of yourself and how you think about what AI is?
Hi, my name is Christiane Luible. I'm the scientific person here. I'm not an AI expert. I'm a professor at the Fashion and Technology Department of the University of Art and Design in Linz. So I have a background in fashion design, but also in fashion research. So we focus a lot on research projects, fashion and technology, and we experiment how we could use robots for design. So AI for me is a kind of extended machine learning, but with the focus, so what can we really do with it? So how can we really learn and do better processes with these new possibilities?
So if I could, Stefan, if I could adjust my my definition, since others took liberties. I was brought up Catholic, so I'm very strict in how I follow instructions. So I also agree, with Sanjay, we use machine learning and a lot of visual recognition as well. Christiane, I can't wait to talk with you a little bit about how we're viewing it with fashion design.
Yes, thank you. Unfortunately, Caroline couldn't join us. She's not feeling well today. So that makes me the final panelist. I'll quickly introduce myself as well. So I'm a professor at Utrecht University of Applied Science. I'm also director of the Asimov Institute, where we research AI and creativity. So I have a technical background in AI. I want to start with maybe a question that focuses on the value of AI to your business. I think the audience will be interested in that. So maybe one of you wants to start and pick this up. In what ways can AI add value to your business?
I'll go.
Sanjay? Yes.
Thanks, Stefan. So as was said by Max and others, there are several ways in which data can help augment decision-making. And the key area that I always suggest for customers and partners is, where are those areas where you have a lot of data and the data can provide you rich insights, and from those insights, you can not only help augment decision-making, you can also optimize. And so some examples can be, for instance, what is the right product? If anybody has gone onto a website and they've seen something that says recommended for you, there's likely a machine learning engine behind that. Analyzing root causes for why your business may be accelerating or not doing so. Obviously optimizing for the highest revenue and margins. How do you manage pricing, particularly in a B2C type of business? Things like fraud detection. If you're seeing a lot of traffic and there's a higher incidence of fraud, of course that's a great AI and machine learning application, and so on. So you can look at this across the creative side of the business. You can look at the operating side of the business. You can even look at the organizational aspect of the business. Wherever you have a good amount of data is a potential opportunity to get to a better place.
Thank you. Maybe Camilla, you would like to offer your perspective as from Servitude and where AI adds value to your business.
Yeah, so I'd like to give a little. So I spent longer than I'd like to admit in the pharmaceutical industry as a serial entrepreneur, and I'd founded 2 predictive modeling companies. Back then, we called it predictive modeling. One was simulating clinical trials. So I would call that, pretty scientific, religious, analytics. And I found myself somehow going back to fashion school, and I did an MFA in fashion design. Never wanted to do it, but there I was, and running my own fashion label, and had a problem with fitting clothes on people, and realized that we could actually solve this fit problem using similar ways that we had solved clinical trial design. So we started working on this, and we built a recommendation technology system using knowledge base of correlating silhouette and design details with the curvature of the body, and with a lot of machine learning wrapped around it, and very quite elegant robust visual recognition technology. But we made recommendations. So we found an 11%, quite a good recommendation system. But what we found is that through this is that there were pockets of people who we couldn't recommend clothes for because nobody had designed for them. And so we realized that the problem is really back in the design studio, back in my neighborhood. So then we had to take the same thing we had built and apply it and make an AI design product so that to help fashion designers design for more body shapes. And because I was a designer, we approached it to assist, not to replace.
Thank you for that perspective. I think it's something that's common in digitization, where you're brought in as the experts to help digitize existing business processes, and you end up changing the business processes themselves and giving insights that were completely unexpected. I think this provides a very nice example of this. Perhaps, Max, I can ask you to give your perspective on with respect to the Formula One.
Absolutely. And I think there are a lot of bridges that we can build between F1 and the apparel industry, and to build on exactly what Camilla and Sanjay said. I think we use AI on the business side, so not talking about the cars, in 4 different ways. I think are very similar to what you can do in the apparel and design industry. First is CRM. Sounds very obvious, managing fan data or customer data, which on our hand is very different. Not all our fans are customers. Not that is our ambition either. That obviously there are a lot of things you can do: segmentation, clustering, understanding better next best action models, and predictive, depending if it's a product you're trying to sell. We have some products that are more like Spotify models, so pay by month or by annually, and so you have churn prediction, churn management. That's one part. Then you have the product, which on our side is we're using data and AI, and more importantly, we scan and we try and understand the sentiment online of our products, our product being the F1 race, the F1, what's happening live during the Grand Prix or during the quali. And we really try and analyze what people say and try to correlate this with what's happening on the track. And the important things here that we're trying to do, which I think can be very relatable to the apparel industry, is trying to differentiate what people say they want and what they really want, or what they like versus what they say they like. And like we do some really cool stuff where we do some passive and active measurement. So for instance, passive would be you have a specific application on your phone and you ask someone to click when there's something they like when the race is on, versus passive, which is you monitor Twitter or you monitor some online forums that are really available and you scan what people like and don't like. And sometimes you see some very big differences into what they say they like. Well, actually, when it happens on TV, it doesn't impact much the engagement, or it doesn't impact all the KPIs trying to measure. So that's, I think, what's interesting on the product side. We do a lot of digital. I don't include this in CRM because digital is slightly different type of data, cookie-based, still anonymous. There are other things that can be based for us, to improve our traffic. And as Sanjay said, there are a lot of things you can do on there. People like you like this content or this video, or obviously this product in the apparel. And lastly, we do a lot of things around pricing. And we have different products that we sell, but that's obviously still relatable to the apparel industry. We do pricing on TV rights. We do pricing on our OTT offer, which is F1 TV. So when we sell directly to consumers, we do pricing on sponsorship. Different type of products may not all be relatable to the apparel, but obviously pricing analytics is the big thing. What's the good price, and how you can also trying to help negotiation. So help decision making within the business. So that's the different ways we use AI and business analytics in the company.
Thank you. Christiane, perhaps you have a wide overview considering your academic perspective. Could you also offer a perspective on this question, what AI can add to business value in general?
We are focusing at the moment not so much on the data side or in this input and the data treatment. For us, the focus is pretty much on how could we inform the design. So we have an ongoing research project at the moment called Fashion and Robotics, where we try to capture what we are actually doing as a designer. So what do I do as a designer? I motion track what I'm doing. I transfer this to a robot and I see how much interpretation could I get here to obtain a new design. Because I think if you want to create really something new, if you also integrate something called the zeitgeist and the social side of fashion, so for really looking in the future, I think it's very complicated at the moment. So at the moment, we are really looking, okay, what we are actually doing as a designer. So what we are doing as a handcraft, as draping. And so how would a robot interpret this? And so in a kind of generative design. So what would an intelligent machine propose as a design? So it's not data-based, it's not customer-based, it's more on an expertise based on a what is my profession, what am I doing? So, but it's not easy. It's first steps.
Yeah. Do you find that when you're looking into sort of creating these robots or these software algorithms that take over a part of this creative process, do you find that most designers have similar creative processes, or is it different every time? Because I can imagine if you're trying to automate parts of this process, that some type of similarity in the process is very helpful.
This is a very good question, and I think I can better answer it maybe in 2 years, because we are just at the start of the project, and at the moment we are just happy that we can somehow track and transfer the movement to the robot. We are very happy that not in real time, but the robot is doing what I am doing. And then the next step would be a kind of machine learning. So, okay, what do you do and how would the robot do it? So I think this is a field where I think, like, for thinking in businesses, I think it's quite a step to go, I would say. But this is our our outlook for the future.
Great, thank you.
So I can actually answer that question from a different point of view, because we're solving the same problem from a different perspective. The way I learned to design at fashion school is to take inspiration, trend, and then design from there and incorporate that into new design, and making sure that the new designs are within brand DNA. And that's how we're designing. So we built a generative, not a GAN, but we draw out new designs in our system. So we actually are able to draw it so that since we capture the archive of the design house of the designer, what we draw looks like what the designer has done previously. But it is challenging to try and talk to designers about this, because our goal, because if you read the headlines, lots of creatives are quitting, because I tell you, that was the hardest job I ever had, was being a fashion designer. It's exhausting, but we're gluttons for punishment, because we built this to help them, but they don't really want help. It's hard to convince them that this is not cheating, and this sort of thing. So we're early days. We're just beginning to launch the product, but it's challenging to bring technology into creatives.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just want to add to what Camilla just said. And at Stylumia, we're also taking insights, from website crawling. So, for instance, what is the style trend? What's the color trend? What's the trend of the collar? Is it of a particular shape, etc. And we've turned that to what you're describing into also, and this is a GAN-based, a generative adversarial network-based engine that does come back with designs. What we found is that just presenting that as a thing to play around with was actually much more helpful, because there's no way that we're looking at replacing the designer, right? But what we are showing and demonstrating is that, hey, this could actually help with the designer's inspiration, like you described. And so that is an area we're seeing a little bit, I would say, more openness, and also a wow factor. It's like, oh, I didn't know that you can actually do this with machine learning. And the point that you just brought up, Camilla, around adoption, I think that's the toughest challenge in this journey, right? And even when we found teams that are well versed with change and believe they're technically savvy, the idea of presenting a black box that is called the machine learning engine, and the black box is putting out some output and some recommendations, and that is a tough one, and we can maybe talk about it more a little later. But the human side of AI adoption is, I think, the most critical aspect of the journey.
So here's the thing. So I'm in Silicon Valley, where DigiDesign was started, and that's where they brought in technology to music creation. And actually, my husband was in the startup when it was starting in the early days. So I talked to Peter Gocher, who was the CEO, and they also, it took really 10 years to get that technology adopted. And it was not AI. They went into the garage and they sampled all the different instruments and put it together to help musicians, but, it really was a helping tool, but it was technology. That was a black box in those days. So we're just at the new frontier of a new kind of black box, I guess. But I'm hoping that it will be less than 10 years for adoption on this one.
Well, talking about adoption, I can imagine if I were a fashion designer who is worried that my job would disappear or would be automated, but I would have knowledge of AI and data, I would probably bring forth the following argument. What we see in AI is that it's basically statistics, particularly the type of AI that has become popular over the last decade, looks back into historical data and tries to infer or extrapolate from that data into the future. And so this would be my argument as a fashion designer. How could I ever be replaced? Because I'm capable of looking forward instead of looking just backwards. What would you say to this fashion designer?
I'm happy to take that one. Not being a fashion designer, maybe I get the benefit of the doubt. I'd say that for me, AI or computer or machine learning, or however we want to use, what term we want to use, it works the exact same way humans work. We base ourselves based on data points, with the information we have, whether we accept it or not, whether we're fully aware of it or not. And there you can take into account some cognitive biases or so that sometimes we're not aware of. But we do always make decisions. And I think creativity is just a different way to rearrange things we've seen somewhere else in another way. But I agree with you. The point, I guess, isn't to replace people. It's just to help them in the best way possible. So I think that's what I would say. It's like, don't be afraid.
I can add something also to the discussion before, because adoption in design, I think there's also a new generation of students coming now. Mm-hmm. And if you come in the education over the project, and if they really feel that there is a need, or if it makes sense for their artistic project, they are quite good in learning technology. This is our experience here in Linz. And I also agree what you say with historical data. I think fashion design, if you really think of new and the social aspect of design, I think it's a very complex thing. We are a very complex society, what we interpret in fashion design. So obviously we cannot base a zeitgeist today on data. I think there is more to really generate new design. I think at the moment we can create something, but we are not really creative in the sense with the machines or with machine learning. But it doesn't mean that it's possible, because in fashion design we are much more confronted with data, what we have to consider. I just bring in the word of sustainability. I think we face huge challenges. So why not informing with AI to make better decisions, to have a better design based on better decisions? And I think here today it could already do a lot in informing better, and then step by step we will see. I think today we just do not know when it comes that we say, oh yeah, this is now really a good design made by AI. This is really future.
Christiane, I think you're right on the money there. I think that we have been talking about what's wrong with fashion, because fashion is going through so much turmoil, and I think COVID just exacerbated the issues with fashion. And so I think AI and for example, our technology and Sanjay's technology and many other technologies are facilitating a transition into future fashion. And one of the things that we do, and I'm sure, many other companies can help reduce, everything that's going into the landfill and, other pollution issues and inequity. There's so many social problems that we can also address with new ways of looking at fashion. So I think when we were talking about new technologies, we should be looking at maybe bringing on new business models to solve more than one problem. So that's how we're looking at it, and we're embracing. And a lot of people are talking to us about new business models and going forward with solving many of these problems.
Well, that's actually Sanjay. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Sorry. Thanks, Stefan. If I can just to add some context or some data to this. So recent studies have shown that there are over 100 billion pieces of apparel produced every year. And just about 1/3 really hit the mark in terms of the right style, the right price, the right fabric, etc., the right color, right? And the rest of it is this long tail of discounting and promotion. And a huge number of these garments actually go into landfills and to donation centers and other places that were not intended right from the get-go. And while I think there is a general awareness about how AI and machine learning can help this problem, I think there are many aspects all along the value chain where we can create the solutions that help companies and organizations get more precise with the decisions they're making, and therefore reduce the environmental impact. So totally agree with what you both said, Camilla and Christiane. It's a superb opportunity in front of us.
Yep. Thank you for that perspective. Talking about business models, I'd like to make a leap to the next question. So looking at the AI ecosystem and how it's developed in general, also outside of apparel, we've seen many large companies and industries jumping on the bandwagon very early, particularly big tech. So we know Google, Apple, Facebook invested heavily in talent and also startup acquisition. For example, DeepMind has been bought by Google for over $500 million in 2014, 6 years ago. Now, recently, we see that AI technology is becoming more and more commodified and accessible to a wider audience of companies. What I'd like to ask you is, to what extent do you believe that AI is viable for any company size?
I'm happy to start with that one. I think there is a very interesting saying by Dan Ariely, who's a professor of behavioral economics at Duke, I believe, who said a couple of years ago, it's not new, something like big data is like teenage sex. Everyone talks about it. Nobody really knows how to do it. And everyone thinks everyone else is doing it. So you have to claim that you're doing it. There is a bit of that.
Wait a minute. Wait. Okay, well, let's not take a poll. Sorry.
Go on, Camilla.
Sorry, no, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Just being inappropriate.
Sorry. No, for me, what I wanted to say is, a lot of people claim they're doing things they may not be doing. That's my point. And when you look under the hood of any company, it's never as promising or as beautiful as they claim to be in the media. And I think the first thing is you have to concentrate on what you want to do yourself rather than trying to look at what people are claiming to be. And I do personally believe it's viable for any company size. Despite how big F1 seem on the outside, we're not that big. We're quite a small company in terms of especially number of people, and we have to do things we can internally with what we have, and we don't run on amazing budgets to do everything. And so we have to make decisions as to what can we do ourselves, what do we have to outsource, and we have to be smart about it. And as Sanjay said, you have to analyze on the value chain what makes more sense for what we're trying to do. Where can AI be better than the human doing it, or where it makes no sense? And I think I believe you can use many tools nowadays that are free to use or very cheap, from both data processing, data hosting, just running models. You can use softwares that are totally free, based on community, and there are many things you can do on the cheap and be doing a really good job without having to go into the super expensive tools or models you can buy from whatever company. I think that's my perspective. It is possible. It's not that easy, but I think it's also about the people. I think it's also about who you want to bring in. And as all the panelists said before, the human challenge is the biggest one, more than the technological challenge, and about forming people internally, helping through the transition if it changes the people's job or people day to day. And this is for me what's important. More than how expensive it is to do it.
Thank you for that perspective. Any other of the panelists would like to comment on this question about AI being viable for any company size?
Sure. Go ahead, Camilla.
Go on, Scott, Sanjay, you got it.
No. Camilla, you...
Yeah, well, yeah, I think that if you're talking about a very small company developing their own, or even a lot of people doing it in-house, I think that's getting to the point where that's maybe not a good idea. There's so many companies building really, really strong solutions for everyone. It's like, there's got to be standards that, because if you want to grow, there are going to be other things built for the standard. You've got to start buying from those companies who are supplying the solutions. So, going a long way to say, I think everybody can use AI, but I think, buying it from people who know what they're doing when they're building it is probably the better way to go.
I just want to add, if you think about the fundamentals of what it takes to take advantage of AI, it's the ability to model a problem, and it's the availability of good data. And I can't stress the data aspect enough, right? So a small company, a startup, 2 people, 1 person, absolutely, you can take advantage of these capabilities because there's somebody else likely, to Camilla's point, that's providing that solution. So I think it's about the mindset. The other is the number of times that I've seen challenges in this industry. I'm going to give you very specific examples. Does the organization have a consistent definition of what a style is, right? There's a lot of data out there, but the ability to get clean data, the ability to have data that doesn't have any duplication, data that can be integrated across different dimensions, that is kind of the gas for the engine. So if you think about an F1 analogy, you can have the very best engine, but if the quality of your gas is not, at par, then you're not going to get good results. And so that, to me, is part of the consideration. But if you're looking at external data as a startup or a small company, then you have to ask the provider, what have they done to make sure that the data quality is good? And if you're looking to embark upon this journey internally, then I think having the right standards, the right guidelines, and the right strategy around how to use data as an asset will go a long way.
Thank you. Sanjay, you have a background in VC. So this lock-in situation that can occur, right? Where if you are an early stage startup, you need data. Sometimes you have a launching customer that will provide you with this data, but it might not be so happy if you find another customer. What advice would you offer? And I know this is a difficult question, but what advice would you offer to early stage startups or maybe people thinking about being an innovator in this field on how to deal with this data scarcity problem?
So there's a couple of things. I think one is a lot of companies, as they're thinking about what would be an information-centric operating model, right? I start there, and I've seen this with a lot of customers. What I mean by an information-centric model is thinking about data first before you think about process. A lot of companies have been designed by thinking process first, and then, how does data enable the process? So the first step, I believe, is to flip that. And the second step, then what happens is companies realize that there's a certain area of their business that they believe they can actually create a differentiated advantage in. So there's a competitive advantage for them. And so picking those areas, I think, is important, because then you can start to invest to say, I'm going to get my data ecosystem to be better than somebody else. And then the third step, I think, typically is looking at what sources of data you have, because chances are, there's a lot of external data that can help you get going, even though you may not have the scale and the amount of data internally. And so the type of decision making that you want to enable through AI and machine learning and the data journey can be mapped in a way that you get some initial wins and then you continue to evolve.
Can I opine here? I also was a venture capitalist back in the 1980s in New York for 4 years. And I agree with some of what you said, but I have a slight divergence. I think it's imperative that you have domain expertise when you gather your data. Otherwise, you have, generic data, undifferentiable data. And that's really what set us apart from, the 200 other companies that are out there. So we sat down, we have fashion designers sit down with our engineers, and they're still sitting down with our engineers. And so we built our own training sets. And what that means is that because we had our own fashion label, we had our own photo shoots, we know what the tricks are when you take photos. So our visual recognition data sets we make sure we have all those tells in there so that when we're identifying things, we know how to identify them. And so, we can go through social media and identify, clothing in crowds, and, when people are standing on their side or occluded clothing, which other people can't do. And that's because we had the domain expertise in there. We didn't know it then that was going to be our advantage, but we know that today. And so I think that having the domain expertise, from the get-go is really, really, really important. And because you don't know what you don't know, that's going to be important later on.
Thank you. So Christiane, perhaps you could offer your perspective on this viability of AI for a company size, and maybe in answering the question, who do you think your research, or what companies your research will benefit? Will it be the larger industries, or maybe startups, or even students who are thinking about moving in this field?
Obviously, we have no company experience, but in general, what we are doing in the university, we focus a lot on small sizes. We really want to make it possible for our students to create their own structures, and not necessarily joining a big company, but also to make it again possible to start a small business, startups. So every technological development, what we do, or invention, what they are also developing together with us, we really focus on new technology, but affordable. So I also think even if you work with robots, it's not necessarily highly expensive. There are also today affordable small robots. And I also believe a lot that, as I mentioned before, we are not so much working with data. We have different experience, and this interface with the robot, I think this can especially augment the designer. It's not replacing a designer, it's working together, it's assisting. It's how do I communicate? Maybe the robot is today doing tasks which are too heavy, or which are too complicated, or which are too time consuming. So these working together, these collaborative processes, I think this is very much of interest for us, and for finding new businesses or finding new solutions with the students. So, and also with the data, as we are the art university, we are also kind of critical in that sense, because if you use too much data of the existing data, you base yourself also so much on an existing reality. And I think today we also implement a lot this critical view on technology, like is the machine really doing it in a democratic way, or is it doing it in an inclusive way? And these are also very important aspects what we are doing. And I think here also, again, there's a big potential for our students to create their businesses in the future. It's more abstract. I mean, you are more in the business of today, but I think in the future, all these aspects, what we try to educate, will be important.
Yes, I recognize what you're saying also from my university, Christiane. Yes, these things we foresee these things becoming important in the next 5 to 10 years. We have a question from the audience, I think, which relates nicely to what we're discussing right now, which is particularly aimed at those of you with a background in other industries in apparel. So having experienced an AI investment yourself, what is the first step for starting this journey? I think we already discussed the role of data, or the importance of data in its first steps, but perhaps you can take a wider look and give advice to new people or new companies entering this field. What is the first step they should take?
Talk to your
maybe Sanjay, yes? Oh, yeah.
So the first off, I think, is recognizing that any new startup is going to have an aspect of data. That dimension of what data means to the business is a question I think that any business in today's environment should be thinking about. I think the second is around how that data can provide meaningful use to the company. So we all live with data, but I think the ability to think about how that data translates into better decision making, or decision augmentation around masses of data that you couldn't get after, like Max was saying earlier. The human capability just isn't there. But you're a startup and you want to see that ability. Well, that's another example. I think the third and very important one, and Camilla kind of talked about this, is who in your company, if you are the founder and the sole individual, you're also wearing a CDIO hat or a Chief Data Information Officer hat, right? So at the very early stages, who is the talent that you are bringing in that can think about this new paradigm and that can bring that thinking into the core operation of the business? I think those are some examples. There's so many different ways to slice and dice this. So I'd be the first to say that that this isn't the only one, but that's just a thought.
Camilla, yes?
Yeah, I think the first thing you need to do is talk to your customers and make sure there's a need that you're going to be able to sell your product, and you should develop relationships, form a customer advisory board, keep, not a formal thing, but start a community, keep that engagement going, or you're going to be building something and that, a bridge with no landing. People tend to fall in love with what they're doing, and So, too many times that happens.
Yeah. Which capabilities do you think are essential to have in place in order to ensure AI success? So we have the data, we have the customer, maybe access to capital as well, but which capabilities or types of talents should a company have?
Well, you kind of just threw away that access to capital. That's not so easy.
Okay, well, go ahead. Yes.
It's not that, yeah.
I think the biggest quality is curiosity. If you're willing to ask yourself the question, how else could I solve this problem? And how could I apply a different way of thinking? Then that's the first step, because it helps you, discover what capabilities are there that one may not even come across.
And persistence, yeah.
Max, I think, yes?
No, yeah, I totally agree with Sanjay and Camilla. Curiosity and persistence. I think to add to this, I feel like one of the first thing, which is very important to get it right, is getting the right person to lead this AI transformation or data transformation, however you want to call it. Some people call them data translators. I'm not a big fan of the name, but I think the position is interesting in itself. Is they define this as people that are business savvy, so they understand the business they evolve in. So for me, it would be the sports industry or the apparel industry. They know all the different type of jobs and what people are doing in the company, and they can clearly identify where data can help. And that's not that easy to do, because you have to translate business problems into data problems, and then once you have the data answer, transfer these back into actionable recommendations, which is a very difficult job. I think getting this quality and this curiosity is very important, more so than getting a data engineer, who is still very valuable. But I think getting this person who can talk business and understand the value of the business and everyone in the company and translate these into data problems and leading like a project, I think this is very key.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I think the way you say it, it also relates to what we said when we talked about business processes and automation, right? So typically a person like that would come into a company to think about how automation or AI can help the company. But then you also need to have the personal skills to convince the rest of the company to change their business processes, and that's often very. It's not just a technical skill. Let's put it that way. Camilla, Yeah.
So I'm really intrigued by this part of the conversation because I'm reflecting on my co-founder, Nick Clayton, who I wish were here on the panel. And you'll be amused by how this came about. He did children's theater with my son, so that's how I met him. So I think he was like the smartest kid in Palo Alto and went on to school and whatever and graduated, and I somehow recruited him to do this. He's just a genius. He's great, but he's the most affable guy. But I don't think of this as a data company at all. I mean, and so I need to talk to him about it and just say, am I like off somewhere else? Because I'm not a technologist. You all recognize that right away. But we think of it as technology, but not data. But if in terms of him leading it, I have to say that we're successful because he's incredibly smart and curious, but he's also quite capable of putting himself in someone else's shoes. And somehow he can do that with fashion designers, and I don't know how he's able to do that, but he's able to do that.
So Camilla, you mentioned a little bit earlier that I just stepped over the investment and the funding thing, which is actually a good point. So maybe we should get back to that, and we have a following question maybe. So to what extent would you agree that an investment in AI is paramount to the ongoing survival of your business? So in what ways can AI impact the competitive edge and the diversification of your products?
For us, it's 100% of our business. It is 100%. Our business. It's 100% of it. We wouldn't have this company without it. It's 100%. So is that's the only way I can answer it. Would you like? I don't know how else. What else?
Well, perhaps one of the other panelists would like to reflect on this. The investment in AI as a necessity for the ongoing survival of your business.
Yes, I'm Sanjay. Share this from let's say from an apparel, footwear, consumer brand perspective, just as an example. I think it is ultra critical to think about the investment. I think equally important is to figure out how to do it in a smart way. So what I'm getting at is that this journey entails a lot of learning. Even if you've got the best data scientists and you've got the best, business experts, et cetera, there is a ton of learning. And so I think the smart way to do this is to figure out how you can very rapidly get to some ROI, some outcomes that demonstrate the value and can also act as a flywheel to get more momentum within the organization. So thinking about the investment is not so much the amount, because you can get a lot of benefit from a relatively reasonable amount. If you're, let's say, for instance, partnering with a SaaS provider, and I would throw our company in that space. But you can also go down and say, I'm going to create my own data science capabilities and make a massive investment in people, in technology, et cetera. So it's about the ability to start small and to improve or radically improve the speed that I think gets the best outcome.
I have a comment to make. I obviously cannot speak for the Apple industry, which I don't know enough, but I have more of a general comment to make on how AI is reshaping businesses nowadays. I think it's not that it's putting anyone at risk of losing business from one day to the other. It's more like to use the comparison on the arrival of electricity centuries ago. People were doing business before it was there, and it took some time for it to transition. But anyone who didn't invest early enough or didn't do it enough, they were at risk of not being there in 20, 30 years down the road. And we're not putting any imminent risk for the business to stop making business from one day to the other. I think it's the same with data. No one is going to close shop tomorrow because of the lack of it, or at least not that I'm aware of. But if you don't start at some point within the next few years, if you don't get it right, you may be at risk of getting overtaken by other companies that are smarter and better, and you might miss the point on many occasions.
So let me put you on the spot with this question. Which is more important for a startup, funding or data?
Good question.
Funding to get the data right.
I'm going to do a little round and ask every one of you to answer the question if you want to.
I agree with Max.
Okay.
I'd say, I'm obviously not an expert in VC, so I'm happy to follow Camilla and Sanjay's feedback on this, but I believe that it's about the idea what the project you're trying to do, the team you have together. And if you do things right, the funding should follow if you have a good idea, a good project, and the right people. So I'm pretty sure it's not that easy as Camilla said. But if you get the data or the mindset, more than the data, more the people around it and the idea of the project, everything should follow, hopefully.
Right, so the better question will be funding, data, or talent, maybe then. I'd like to perhaps close off this panel. I'm looking if there's questions for the audience. I don't see any. With a very open question that I'm hoping all of you would like to answer, which is about the following, that it's very difficult, of course, to predict the future. And this is particularly true for the future of predictive algorithms. But we can try. So what I'd like to reflect you on is, how do you see the future role of AI in the apparel industry? And you can give a very general answer to the entire industry or just for your own company, which is also fine. But what I'm looking for is long-term perspectives. And don't worry, we won't hold you to your promises in 5 or 10 years from now.
I'm happy to start, since I guess I'm the one who knows the least on the subject.
Go ahead, Max.
Based on what I've heard and based on the importance of the creative process, I'd say for me is how to combine the human and the AI into what the humans are good at, being creative, and what AIs are good at, being fast, computing a lot of data and a very efficient and cost-effective way. I think the way to go is how you can combine the best of both worlds, what humans are good at versus bad at, and how you can use computers to make them better at what they're bad at. And that's how I would reply to the answer to the question.
I just think back in history, and I look at the rise of computing, the rise of basic apps like Excel, right, and Word, the rise of the iPhone, the rise of apps. I mean, these were all in their own ways breakthroughs, and we've come to live with them, and they are in many ways our best friends, and they have a lot of advantages, and they have some things that could be seen as a double-edged sword. And I think AI is going to be similar to that. It's going to be our best friend, and we sometimes have to be watchful. So that's my take.
Do you want to go, Christine?
Yeah, I can also go. And for me, I want to bring up the word of sustainability once more. And I think this, for me now, it's I really hope that we find good business model in the near future to get to act more sustainable. And in the far future, I'm really curious. I'm really looking forward to the point when I really see, oh wow, yeah, today now it's not just creating, it's creativity. So we really do something with the AI, and I don't see it. I'm not frightened. I think it's interesting. But for the near future, definitely sustainability to find better solutions.
So in the first quarter of next year, we'll be able to go from original design with original design details, digitally from inspiration through to cut and sewn garment in less than an hour. And I mean, we're partnering with people who can do that. And applying that to on-demand manufacturing. And I think that that's going to be just a game changer in fashion. And with the ability to personalize trends for influencers and individuals, I think the whole idea of personalized fashion is going to, can easily become pervasive. And with on-demand manufacturing, this whole idea of waste is going to, greatly be reduced. So I think AI is going to, and that's only because AI is, becoming cost efficient and, making it possible.
Well, thank you for those perspectives. I'm taking a quick peek at the audience questions. I have one more question. We have a couple of minutes left. So let me ask you this question, which is very relevant to the moment we're in. Do you see the pandemic having any impact on AI implementation?
Yes. We've seen customers focus, of course, on their e-commerce operations, as everybody knows, and the openness to deploy and implement new AI-based capabilities is extremely high. And what we're seeing is especially if you can focus on the near term and share how you're going to create a return on investment, let's say within the 3 months timeframe, that is incredible. And so we are seeing a significant rise in demand.
Is there anybody else who would like to reflect on this question? I don't see hands raised.
I think it has changed the industry because what we're talking about doing, the on-demand manufacturing and all of that was 2-3 years out, and now we see that happening. We move that forward 2 years in our planning. So it's just brought everything forward in time, like you said, and it moved e-commerce out, that growth significantly.
Yep. I think that's actually a very hopeful and optimistic perspective that you just offered there at the final end. I think we're also reaching the end of our panel discussion very shortly. I myself tried to weave in some of my own perspectives into the question asking. I didn't offer too many answers myself. That's because I'm going to give a talk later today, which I'm now shamelessly promoting. For this panel, I'd really like to thank you, Christiane, Camilla, Sanjay, and Max, and of course the audience for joining us. I hope this has been very insightful. It was, at least for me. So we have perhaps a 2-minute break. I don't know the program exactly, and then I think the program will continue. So thank you very much for watching, and thank you for joining us all.
Thank you, Stefan.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.